Thank you so much for being here tonight and watching our replay. Hello to all of the replay viewers. I'm Jen from Work Wonders Careers, and we're excited to be talking about managing your career transition this evening with our former client and current friend, Alexa. So thank you so much for being here, Alexa.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. And I know that it's not easy sharing a story like this necessarily, or it's not easy for everyone. So thank you so much. I'm glad you're well into your new job and adjusting well and at a good point to kind of share your story with other folks. So to get started, could you just share a little bit, like what was your job like before you moved into your current role in customer success?
Yeah, so I was working for E&J Gallo Winery in a management development program. So I was working, I was sales. So at first I had a couple different roles there, but they were direct selling. So I was working with grocery retailers. I moved up the versions of the people I was selling to, but essentially at the end of the day, I was responsible for that territory sales in the Boston market. And then I was in New Hampshire for a little bit. So I managed the sales cycle on a one-to-one basis. And then I started managing people doing that. And then I ended up in my last role managing essentially like the go-between between the national sales strategy and then trying to funnel that down to the New Hampshire sales team. Yeah. So a couple different roles, but they were all very CPG sales focused, which is not really what I'm currently doing. So,
and so you started to feel like that actually isn't what you wanted to be doing, right? Like is that sort of how you kind of you pushed yourself into the transition?
Yeah, I think what happens, I had that job right after school. And I think what ended up happening was I learned so much in that time frame, and it was a very great starting point for me. But what I started to realize was what I liked about it and then what I didn't really love about it. And I really wanted to be able to capitalize on the things that I loved and try and shift or pivot to incorporate more components of that and make that more my focus. Because I started realizing that the things I liked the most were more the peripheral pieces and not the core. And so I wanted to make them the core.
Yeah, I actually really like the way you say that, because I feel like especially out of college, that's how a lot of people feel. Like there are like hints of something, but it's not quite the right job. And so I like the way you started to identify that. Mm-hmm. So you had been looking for a job for a little bit before we met. So what kinds of things were you doing at that point to kind of get your process started?
Oh, I feel like everything. Like I was all over the place. Like I was looking at job boards, but those were extremely overwhelming. And I didn't even know how to be filtering them, to be completely honest. But I also will say that I still am in the mindset of I wanted to be exposed to kind of everything and then be able to filter it down. So I think before I met you, I was trying to almost like oversaturate myself with information. Strategically and then sometimes just accidentally. And so I was looking at job boards, I was looking at LinkedIn, I was trying to go to more networking events, which the one thing I really, really am still harping on is like I need to be networking even when I'm not looking for a job.
Yes.
But so like those types of things. And then I actually ended up meeting you at the what was the meeting that we met at?
The Wonder Woman of Boston.
The Wonder Woman of Boston at Tate. And so that was like a perfect, like the stars aligning, because at that point I felt like I was so spread out in what I was looking at and like what I could be interested in and what I thought was interesting, but didn't have any context to. And then meeting you, I think I was ready then to start like siloing down and really making sure that I was focusing on the right things.
Yeah. So it sounds like you purposefully like gave yourself a little free rein to just kind of explore and like throw everything at the wall. And what made you decided to work with me. And that was in part to have someone help you with the process of like starting to really be strategic and exploring your options.
Totally. And I mean, I think I was just really, really all over the place, which was great. Like I got to see a lot of different areas. And I mean, we're so fortunate enough to be in a city that like you can look at many different industries and there are so many different roles available and you have so much, but sometimes having so many choices is almost as bad as having like none.
Yes.
And so I think when I met you, I needed like structure. Like I also needed someone to remind me like, almost like I was doing too much work, or I was like repeating myself in areas.
Yeah. Yes,
So.
that's true. Sometimes I make people do less work.
Yeah.
You can be spreading yourself too thin and not get traction.
Yeah.
One of the things I remember about working with you that I really liked and admired was that you weren't afraid to say no to opportunities. Like when you dug in and had conversations and heard things that you didn't like, or like that didn't sit right with you, like you weren't afraid to walk away. And it's very hard often to convince job seekers, like people who want, an eject button, as I like to say, of their current situation, to walk away from things. So how did you kind of manage the stress of like being in a job and being eager to make a transition and still manage to say no to things?
Yeah, I know. It's so easy to sit here and be like, yeah, that like totally made sense. I think honestly, like mindful is such a buzzword right now, but like I really do believe in I was just very mindful of why I wanted to make that change.
Yeah.
And so identifying those areas that, sorry, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
My Wi-Fi says it's unstable. So,
Okay.
so I think because I identified what those were, as soon as those areas started popping up for me when I was looking at other roles, even if the interview was going completely fine from their standard, they were kind of just my red flags. Like they were the areas where if I didn't completely feel comfortable with the answer, that I dug in more. And if they were explaining what they were offering and it aligned with what I was trying to move on from, I just was, I might as well have just stayed where I was. So yeah, I think being very mindful of what you want, but then also being mindful of the things that you're trying to move on from helps you identify that in wherever you're looking.
Yeah. I think that's really well said. So how did you start to hone in on, or like maybe it's what we did together, like how did you start to like peel apart or then remold like what you wanted out of a job and really think like this is a good direction for me?
Yeah. I mean, I started thinking about just like the pieces that I really liked or loved. And I think actually, I take that back. I did that after I thought about the pieces that I really didn't like, because I feel like it's super easy to identify the negatives. So that was what I started peeling apart. And I'm a big believer in the things that you hate also have pieces that you probably love about them too. And so trying to look at them in a two-sided approach of, I didn't love sales, but I did love having like value adds for customers.
Yeah.
And I didn't like having to hit a quota necessarily, or the deliverable aspect of sales was just not what was motivating me. Like what was motivating me was my relationships with customers, really curating like an experience for them, making sure that what I was selling was a market fit. Like there were just pieces that at the end, what I produced as a salesperson on paper looked like, oh, she's really good at sales and this is why she does it, to get whatever it is. If it's the bonus or to just be the leader in the quota hitting, et cetera. But really what it wasn't that at all. It was the fact that I just really liked people and I liked having them learn from me and also learning what they needed and then trying to fit what I was representing into that picture.
Yeah. Actually, listening to you say that like reminds me of something that you used to say a lot, which isn't in my list of prep questions, but something I still want to ask you about. So sorry to put you on the spot, but you used to talk about like values that you hang your hat on. Like, can you talk a little bit about how you approach that? Because in some ways, this was like a values-based transition for you. Like, you had transferable skills, and we'll talk about that, but values were really kind of at the crux of this for you in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And I think that was like one of the biggest drivers was I wanted those values to then be kind of mirrored back to me in the environment that I was going to be in. But yeah, I mean, I use that a lot. And this is like, so the sports side of me, like from college when you had to like overanalyze all of your like team dynamics, whatever. But the hang your hat on principle is just like, what are the things that no matter what the situation is, no matter what the stressor is, that you always are doing. And so for me, that was, being an honest person that really values the people that I'm working with, having a vested interest in that outcome. And obviously these are tailored from like a business standpoint, but like they also end up just like flowing into my life.
Yeah.
And just trying to be really authentic. And I think those were a couple of them. I mean, there's like more that are more like personal, but it just came down to like wanting to do the right thing and trying to make sure that the work I was doing was impactful. And that's kind of how I hung my hat, I guess.
Yeah, no, I love that. I think that's really important. And I think people often feel like it's not possible to find a job that where their values can be mirrored back at them. But I think especially in a place like Boston or other major markets where there's lots of opportunities, it's actually is possible, but you have to like be clear about what it is and you have to be willing to hold out for it, which can be the challenging part, I think. Yeah. So you were not afraid to reach out and initiate conversations with people. So can you talk about the role that played and maybe share a little advice for folks who like may not have your courage and wherewithal to put yourself out there?
Yeah. I mean, to be completely frank, I was also like, I mean, this was fake it till you make it in a lot of scenarios. And also like there were a lot that I was confident in doing, but like, I mean, if you look at my resume, it's like sales, CPG, SaaS, CS team, like not just a pivot, like a complete jump.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, even for applying for that, there was a part of me that was like, this is foreign territory. But to be completely honest, like I just really embraced that part of me. And so for the roles that I was applying to that I felt like were out of my comfort zone, I made it very clear in my reach out that I was aware of that. I identified the components that I thought were extremely transferable. And then I just tried to really like pitch myself in a way that made me desirable for the skill set that I had and why I thought it was important for them. And then I think that I'm a big believer in like get me in front of someone. And that was what I was always trying to work towards was like, I'm on the phone, okay, I guess. And like on paper, I'm like decent, but if I can get into a room, like I can explain to you in person why I should be there. And and obviously I got no a lot. And it wasn't that people were like, you know, you don't have, it was more so that they had a certain person that they wanted to hire and I wasn't that candidate. But I will say that I went to an interview for another CS team and I had never, so customer success, and I had never, interviewed at any type of software company or customer success team. And so I went through the whole interview. I met with 3 different people. It went really great. Like I learned a ton. I thought it was an awesome interview experience. Like I was getting exposed to so much. And then, you know, they turned me down because they needed someone that had customer success experience. But then like within 2 weeks, I was interviewing at Salsify where I currently work in the customer success role that I'm currently in. And I was so thankful that I'd had that interview because all of I had the, you know, like the buzzwords and the context and understanding like where that fits in a company. So it actually was great, like homework essentially to then go into the one that I really wanted and like ended up getting.
That's a great lesson for folks who are thinking about making a transition today. I was actually saying to a client today, like people tend to see the outcomes of job interviews as like black and white, like you get an offer or you fail to get an offer, right? But there's so much potential gray area that we can take advantage of. And sometimes it's a networking opportunity, like they really like you and they'll keep you in mind, but they just had a different kind of candidate for this role. Or like you said, like it's like a boot camp for going through to get a job like this and be able to hone in your answers, figure out the pain points a little bit and use it as a learning opportunity to like really calibrate your narrative and your presentation in those interviews. So that's a really good tip. So thank you for reminding us of that. And what about like, so do you think people should like, what are your recommendations for people who are like, I don't really network?
Oh my God, I hate it. I hate the word network. Like I hate everything about like networking. I just think, I don't know. I mean, some of it just comes down to like, I didn't love it either, but I just made a pact to myself that I was going to go to one thing a month. And I'm still trying to do that currently because I honestly thought it was a great experience for me. And then go once a month if you can. And then on top of that, just like, I really tried to go alone. And I know sometimes people say like, bring people with you, but I knew how I was going to be in that environment if I brought someone and I was going to be buddy and like not push myself.
Yeah.
And so I went alone and I just like made a pact to go talk to at least one person that I didn't know. And every time I did that, I left with a business card or I left with a connection or honestly, like every time I left one of those events, I had someone to speak to.
Yeah.
And and again, like just increasing your like network, but I also think it's just like increasing your, your connections with people that are like-minded to you. And I feel like that can only help you, not just in the job search, but in like, as you continue to move forward.
Yeah. And it can be enjoyable in the short term if you pursue things that are like actually interesting to you. Like we met at a networking event and we had a great, conversation. So sometimes it can be like, even if that had been it, like that would have been a great conversation and that would have been like the start of something. So finding places and events and opportunities where you're excited to actually go and like hear the content or meet the people, I think makes a big difference. But I like also setting really small goals, like once a month, go alone, talk to one person. Like it's really that simple. And I like going alone too. I can see why people don't want to go alone, but it's definitely, I would talk to my friends.
I know.
Even now, I would do it.
I know. And the other thing too that I found really helpful was I literally just went on Eventbrite and would do like community searches. So like they don't even have to be like the networking. Like they can just be like groups of people that you would find interesting to get to know, and you can just show up. Like that's what I did too.
Yeah, that's really important. Like I think what's most important is that you be excited to go so that there's motivation to actually attend, because it's one thing to register and it's another to show up.
I know.
As we all know, I'm sure. So let's talk a little bit about like the application process. Like what did you learn about your transferable skills, and also like how to share and convey your transferable skills?
Yeah. So basically I tried to think about, this became easier as like the roles I was interviewing for became slimmer. It was a lot harder when I was applying to a lot more roles that were very different from each other. But once I kind of honed down on like customer success being what I like about the role I was in now, it basically just came down to like, what are the skill sets that will be applicable here? And I had a lot of them, like, face-to-face exposure with customers, being able to work them to a goal, support their, adoption of whatever it is, et cetera. And then the areas that I might not be super well versed in, I also I remember asking this in my interview, and I'm pretty sure I wrote it in my cover letter. If they had ever trained someone to do this role that had come from a non-technical background, because that was really important for me. And I conveyed, I have the capacity to do this. It's just, I don't really want to be your guinea pig that you don't have a structure of what, my gaps might be. Because I'll tell you what my gaps are. And so I was very just open with what those were. And I was very confident in my skill set that I knew I brought to the table that was super easy to transfer. But then in the areas and I would say it was probably almost equal to the areas that I had gaps in. And the areas that I had gaps in, I identified them before they could. And then I basically said, this is how I would envision me filling them. Have you helped someone do that before? And then tried to show examples of when I have stepped up in a foreign environment.
Yeah. I think that's an underutilized strategy, because I think people are afraid to bring awareness, either afraid to bring awareness to their gaps or think that their gaps take them entirely out of the running. Right. Whereas if you can really convey, really your gaps are small. They're basically a content area that you can learn. And it's about finding a fit for you, because what if you were thrown into a role where you were expected to have this technical expertise and then didn't? How fun would that be for you? Not really at all. So part of finding the right fit when you're making a transition is to find a place that's going to accommodate that kind of transition for you. And it's not going to be every role. It's not going to be every place. But again, if you're patient and know what to look for and ask those questions, have you seen people make a transition from X to Y in this context before? How did that look like? What did that look like? How did you support them? Turning your concerns into a question is a really powerful way of acknowledging the gaps. And I like that you're calling them gaps. They're not they don't take you out of the running. They don't make you inadequate in any way, but they help you find a way to find a role that's going to be a good match for what you want to learn and do next, which I think is really important. And if you deny or minimize or just take yourself out of the running because you feel so bad about having gaps, you don't ever get a chance to fill them in. Yeah. And I think you've learned a lot of technical skills in the last few months.
Yeah. Yeah.
Totally. So what did you learn in this process that you think you'll carry with you into your next kind of transition or evolution? What are the pieces of this process that you found you think will be worth replicating again?
Yes, I think that being, having a critical eye, even when you're happy, I think is important. Um, I wish that I had been doing some of the legwork before I got to the point of really not being super happy in my last job.
Yeah.
And that legwork could be going to those networking events. It could be just being reflective sooner. Um, it could have been taking on projects that might have been more cross-functional and outside of my role to like test things out. So I also think that, I mean, I took it as like I was interviewing who was interviewing me. And I know that's also cliche, but I just feel like once you assess where you're at, you should be very confident in being able to sell those components of yourself to people, because they are important and they matter. And like you might feel like, a rat in the rat race type thing, but once you get the opportunity to explain those to someone, like you're already halfway in. Like you just basically have to really hone in on those and be strong in them. And then just like really knowing what I want. Like I think that was the biggest reason, was because I was able to walk into those interviews and say, this is where I'm at. This is where I want to be. This is how I'm envisioning getting there. Do you think you guys have the bandwidth to support me through that? And just really like not downplaying culture. Like I think I used to think that like I could be happy anywhere and that I'd be able to like make my environment great. And to some extent I can, but I also think it's really important. Like there's going to be bad times at work. Like, I mean, you can't really avoid them, but I have a leadership team that I like love and that I know is invested in me, and that will get you through those times. So if I was to leave and look for another role, like I would be trying to replicate that structure in wherever I was going.
Yeah. So those are really good points. So a couple of them that are my favorite tips to like affirm, because I see them causing trouble all the time, is doing some of the legwork before, right? Like a lot of people are motivated to look for a new job when they really want to just start a new one, which is totally not the time. You're making the face like you remember, not the time. And so I think that's just important, because it's one thing to like have an inkling that like this isn't quite the right job, and it's another to want out. And those inklings are an opportunity to like, I actually love your idea of taking on a cross-functional project and getting a sense, because not only does that maybe get you out of the day-to-day grind that's wearing on you a little bit, but it's experience that you can speak to later on. So when someone says, I know you've been on sales, but tell me about your marketing experience, like we have something to draw on and a story to tell that helps create a narrative. And also remembering that you are interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. And that's another hard pill for a lot of people to swallow, because they're like, please pick me. But, I always say it's not a performance. Like you have to show up and you have to be rigorous in your own questioning.
Yeah. I think too, like one thing, because I was that person that was like, I'm so uncomfortable doing that. But then I vividly remember one of my previous managers saying to me, if you're not going to stick up for yourself, like how can we possibly expect you to stick up for our company, or like stick up for really like take a stand when you need to, if like you can't even do it for yourself? Because if you can do it for yourself, there's almost no one else that you'll do it for. Yeah. And I was like, that's actually extremely valid and true.
Yeah. And it's true. And there are places and environments that really value that kind of like clarity and directness. And of course there are places that don't, but that might be a sign, right? Like that might be something to look for. So you mentioned earlier you were looking for a place that like kind of recited your values back to you. So can you tell us like how you knew through the interview and application process that this was going to be like the right move for you? Because you had lots of interviews, lots of conversations.
Yeah, so many conversations. So the first one was they didn't have to say anything. I was interviewed by 5 different people, and 4 of them were women, which was extremely important for me. And they spanned from who ended up being my direct manager all the way to our VP. That was super important for me. I really needed to make sure that I had strong women that were making decisions that would end up impacting me at the forefront. So that was the first piece. I also think that I just asked questions a lot of the time about like teamwork and cross-functionality and what a day looked like in that role, and how just really like how it all fit together, because I wanted to be in a place that valued the input of a lot of different people and teams to come to a decision. It was extremely important for me, and not feeling pigeonholed. And so when I identified that was important for me, they then stepped up to explaining how that's also important to them. And so I think in the situations where things mattered to me, I tried to vocalize how, why, and like how I've come to this point of caring. And then that really enabled them to then say, yeah, and this is how we do X, Y, and Z. This is how we're inclusive of different like working styles and types of people. And, you know, we have like an open vacation policy, but we also like, if you have a child and you need to work from home, like we're open to, you just need to do your work. And that's all it comes down to. Like, you need to do great work. And if you can do that, like, we leave that freedom up to you. And then also just like asking about, I was coming from a place that had a lot of structure, which was mostly based on the industry, because it was alcohol, it's heavily regulated. And so there was a lot of roadblocks in the way of decision making. And so I wanted to be in a place that allowed me to have a lot of agency in making decisions and saying, this is where I think we should go. And, you know, taking that and running with it. And so I brought that to them, and and it's funny now looking back at it, because I had a conversation the other day where I went up to my manager and I was like, so how do we do this? Because I come from a place of like a lot of protocol and like you follow steps and like there's a lot of like structure to it.
Yeah.
And so I walked up to my manager, I'm like, how do we do this? And she goes, I don't know. We haven't had time to think about that yet. So you should just take that and run with it. And I was like, okay, I definitely asked for this, but this is extremely different. So it's just like asking for, how do your values, how do you articulating them, and then asking how like they exemplify them, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. So I feel kind of bad, but like your conversation makes me keep thinking of things that like I didn't ask you before. I didn't tell you I was going to ask you.
I told you I didn't prep anything.
Good. So maybe I'll just pretend this was on the list of questions. Yeah. But like, I'm curious, can you, outside of work, can you share a little bit about like, how has making the transition, like obviously your job is better and you're happier and you're more fulfilled and you have like a team around you in a way that you didn't before, but can you say a little bit about how making the career transition like improve the other parts of your life? Like, what is it like to go from a job where you had a long commute and spent hours in the car, which doesn't have to be the case for everyone, right? But like, what did it feel like before versus after? And what does that look like for the rest of your life?
Yeah. I mean, it looks awesome. I think the biggest difference is I feel different. And I don't know how to like necessarily put that into words, but I realized that I definitely was different when like people very close to me have said like, you're so like, this is so great. Like, it's just like, so not that it was ever bad to be around you, but it's like extremely nice now too.
Yeah.
I think that because I have a place where I care about the work that I'm doing, it just automatically keeps that muscle working in my brain that I'm plugged in and care about wherever I'm at. Yeah. So because I'm constantly focusing on what's in front of me now and I want to be there, I want to like be here. I want to be, when I'm home, I want to be home. Like, I'm just much more, because I'm not having to, I guess when I have to not act like myself, which I'm assuming is the same for a lot of people, it's really tough to like take that mask off and then come home and not feel like it's still kind of on.
Yeah.
And so for me to be able to be authentic there, it just, again, is like making it a habit of being authentic everywhere. Yeah. So I think that's mostly the biggest change that I would say that I feel.
Yeah. It's exhausting, right? To have to like kind of play a character or keep a lot bottled in all day long. And then to finally find an environment where you can feel more at ease makes a big difference.
Totally. Yeah.
I can actually see the difference too. Like I can, and I hear that a lot when clients get a new job, but it definitely seemed like a cloud was lifted and like you just had a lot more energy, probably because you weren't spending hours in the car, right? Like,
yeah. Or like doing a second job, trying to find a job type thing. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes people find like that's really the part where like, oh, I had this hobby of looking for a new job and now I don't. Like, what am I going to do with myself? I don't know, but you'll enjoy yourself. I promise you that. So let me ask you this as we start to wrap up. What is your advice for people who are like listening to this and thinking like, I would like to feel like she feels now and not like I feel now, but worry that making a transition of some kind into a new industry or line of work is just impossible?
I would say that my advice would be focus on your strengths. Don't avoid your gaps at all. Make sure that you actually know them and understand them. And then look for a place and don't be afraid to ask the questions about knowing you are bringing something to the table, and then making sure that that company is ready to support you bringing those great things to the table, and have a plan of how you're going to kind of fill in those gaps. Because at the end of the day, what I identified that was important to my company, and they reciprocated back, was they want different viewpoints, and they don't want to just keep hiring the same person over and over. And I think that that's actually really a common thread in a lot of forward-thinking companies, is that they want different points of view. So determine what yours is, be able to really speak to it and give examples and make it a strong pitch. And then don't be afraid of the areas that you might have to brush up on, because I promise, like, you have the bandwidth to like go out there and search for things. You definitely have the bandwidth to just learn more. So you're totally fine.
Yeah. The hard part is just landing the job, right?
Right. Yeah, seriously.
Yeah. That's a good reminder. So if people have questions and want to learn more about you, like where's the best place to connect with you?
Yeah, so you can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I mean, that's like my professional background stuff. So I'm on there. It's my full name, Alexa Coulombe. Yeah. So you can friend me or connect with me on there. And then, I mean, you can share my email too. So if they want to reach out and you know, ask any questions, I can do that too.
We'll include that in the replay email then.
Great. Perfect.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing this evening. Like, I feel motivated, and I feel motivated and inspired. Maybe I don't spend enough time talking to former clients who are in their happy place now. So it's really lovely to see you really enjoying yourself and thriving. And also, I can vouch, I've seen you out at networking events since you've been there. So very proud of you. High-fiving you for that too.
Thank you.
So thanks again for being in touch. Thank you for watching tonight. And if you have any questions, we'll link to Alexa's LinkedIn profile and share her contact information if you signed up to receive a copy of the replay.
Perfect.
Otherwise, you can find more job search related advice on our website, workwonderscareers.com. And we look forward to seeing you again soon. Thank you so much, Alexa.
Yeah, bye.
Take care.
Yeah.